you. And I believe we're developing tools within the Constitution to do so. Some people in this country want to get rid of them, and they're wrong. They're wrong. You can't expect me and people in this government to do what we need to do to protect you and your family if we don't have the tools that we think are necessary to do so.
And you said within the law, and yet you admitted that there were these CIA secret facilities. Okay.
So what? Why is that not within the law?
The head of Amnesty International says secret sites are against international law.
Well, we just disagree with him. And plus, my job is to protect you. And most American people, if I said that we had who we think's the mastermind of the 9/11, they would say, why don't you see if you can't get information out of him without torturing him, which is what we did.
Were you made personally?
My job is to protect this country, Matt, and I'm going to, within the law. And it gets second-guessed all the time by people who don't live in the United States. But let me remind you, September the 11th for them was a bad day. For us, it was a change of attitude.
These alternative methods you talked about in terms of extracting information from these suspected terrorists, were you made personally aware of all of the techniques that were used, for example, against the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and did you approve all of those techniques?
I told our people get information without torture, and was assured by our Justice Department that we were not torturing.
We also have to work, though, sort of the dark side, if you will.
But did you say
yes, I
that
said all
if the
that.
tapes were viewed outside of the CIA, became public, they would make us look terrible and it would be devastating?
Yes.
Did you say that?
Of course I said that, yes.
The resulting staff report was chilling. The interrogations and the conditions of confinement at the CIA detention sites were far different and far more harsh than the way the CIA had described them to us. What was unique and interesting about the internal documents was not their classification level, but rather their analysis and acknowledgement of significant CIA wrongdoing. The CIA just went and searched the committee's computers.
As far as the allegations of CIA hacking into Senate computers, nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, we wouldn't do that. I mean, that's just beyond the scope of reason. And when the facts come out on this, I think a lot of people who are claiming that there has been this tremendous sort of spying and monitoring and hacking will be proved wrong.
In the end, it was Brennan who was proved wrong. A probe of the matter carried out by the CIA Inspector General's office concluded that CIA employees had in fact improperly searched the Intelligence Committee's computers.
About this particular event about torture, there may be a minority report suggesting that we did gain actionable intelligence from waterboarding and other techniques that are prohibited by the Geneva Convention. I want to disassociate myself with that view. Anything that we gained, we lost more.
And when we engaged in some of these enhanced interrogation techniques that I believe, and I think any fair-minded person would believe, were torture, we crossed the line.
Lawmakers say that redactments made by the administration have made the report essentially unreadable.
But we tortured some folks. And we have to, as a country, take responsibility for that so that hopefully we don't do it again in the future.
Hello, welcome to The Truths. I'm Russell Brand, host of The Truths. Subscribe here to receive more truths. Constantly you'll be inundated with truths, you will. A bit like the way you'll be receiving CIA torture reports. A special Senate inquiry will be released today, revealing to us just how much torture goes on in the CIA. Shouldn't we not be torturing people at all? No, we shouldn't be torturing people a bit, but how much? Let's learn more.
Good morning. U.S. positions alert worldwide as Senate Democrats are poised to release a highly controversial report on CIA activity since 9/11.
Why is the Senate turning into some sort of Tetris game? Minecraft, or whatever it's called. It's gone into some weird pixelated graphic land.
One top lawmaker saying the report could lead to, quote, violence and deaths.
This report could lead to violence and deaths. What's it about? Violence and deaths that we've been perpetrating in the name of some colours on a flag.
Good morning, Bill. Good morning, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum. So this report is going to outline top secret CIA interrogation techniques that were used in the war on terror.
It's so amazing that even as they introduce the item, the still they show is of 9/11. The question is, like, is torture wrong? Here's a big report revealing just some of the torture that's taken place. Apparently it's a 6,000-page report. Most of its findings will never see the light of day. They're going to suppress most of it. When Fox News introduce that information to you, they show you an image of smashed up Ground Zero 9/11. They're establishing a correlation between 9/11 and torture in their mind, which is convenient to their narrative.
Critics warn that its release will only put more American lives in danger, they say.
We're fortunate to have men and women.
Well, I think we all agree with that. What kind of planet would it be if it was just cats, dogs, pebbles and plants?
Who work hard at the CIA, serving on our behalf. These are patriots.
Patriots is one of those words, isn't it, that comes up. I think you might not be a patriot. It's like a weird accusation you can throw at someone. Hey, you're coming across like you might not be a patriot. I am. I'd love, well, flags, borders, other imaginary concepts. I'm really into them.
And whatever the report says, if it diminishes their contributions to our country, it is way off base.
I suppose this report is terrifying to a huge and powerful agency like the CIA, because it makes us question, or should make us question, the considerable clandestine power that these organisations hold. Interestingly rendered through Fox News as, look, we don't want to get involved in what the CIA do. They're bloody patriots. Leave them alone.
And here's the former CIA director, Michael Hayden.
This will be used by our enemies to motivate people to attack Americans and American facilities overseas, and I am genuinely concerned by that.
Genuinely concerned. Like, how can someone go on the news as the head of the CIA go, look, I'm genuinely concerned? Like, shouldn't that be implicit? Pseudo-concerned? What other adjective can you put in front of concerned if you're the head of the CIA? Speaking prior to the release of a 6,000-page document that reveals you're using illegal torture methods on detainees, many of whom you had no right to arrest.
In fact, all of our overseas posts received an advisory warning them to, quote, review their security posture.
We will have to review our security posture. What is it at the moment? Yeah, you might want to review that. How about this?
For a, quote, range of reactions that might occur.
The problem is we've created a climate where we think of torture as oddly acceptable. According to a recent Amnesty report, television programmes like the Fox Creation 24, which was a couple of neoconservative guys created it apparently, glamorise and justify the idea of torture.
What is your primary objective? What is your primary objective?
Like, it helps us to accept that that's a normal part of international espionage.
By torturing Mr. Haddad. By doing what I deem necessary to protect innocent lives.
36% of Britons believe torture is sometimes necessary. Look at some of the techniques that they're using. Electric shocks, rape, waterboarding and mock executions. The Senate report is likely to attract global attention owing to the CIA's network of unacknowledged prisons in places like Poland, Thailand and Afghanistan. I didn't know that, did you? The CIA have got unacknowledged prisons. Sir, what is that building over there with a barbed wire fence around it? I do not acknowledge that.
KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst. KT, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What do you believe will be in this?
It'll have two blockbusters. One, that the United States intelligence community committed torture on terrorist suspects. And number two, that the information gleaned from that torture was not effective.
No big deal. It's just, we've been torturing people. Oh, that's terrible. But I suppose, you know, you did what you had to do. That's right. So what was the results of all your torture? Doesn't work. Sorry, what was it?
All right,
Both are wrong.
So why is it being released?
That's his question. So why, oh why, would you want to tell us that the CIA, a powerful international agency funded by the American taxpayer, is torturing people for no reason? Why would anyone want to know that?
I think part of it is, let's just blame Bush. Part of it is the Democrats are leaving the Senate.
The reason is because we're meant to have some semblance of transparency and democracy. Wouldn't you like to know what people are doing? They're in charge of us at this time as they continue to increase their powers, their abilities to snoop on us, their abilities to detain us, their abilities to have trade agreements around the world that prevent us from having any control over our own lives. The problem isn't that the report's being released. The problem is there's not more reports like it, and the problem is that people are being pointlessly tortured around the globe.
You know, let's kick in the doors and smash the windows on our way out the door. If they can air America's dirty laundry.
She uses some extraordinary metaphors, this lady. We're smashing up the house. I'm washing my pants in the sink. Sorry, can we talk about the torture of innocent people by the CIA? No! Not when my pants are smashing the windows!
If they can show the world how terrible we were and that they're different, somehow we're going to be forgiven of that great sin. It's like expiating for your guilt.
It's not just America, this problem either. Several foreign governments, including the UK and Poland, are fearful, UK where we live, or I live at least, identification by the Senate and have added to the pressure on the committee. Would you mind awfully not revealing any of this information?
Well, we've seen in history that this is exactly what has happened. We did this in the late 1970s. Foreign intelligence agencies say, we're not going to cooperate with you. We can't trust you to keep the secrets.
Do you want us to not be trusted by the Belgian CIA, or the Luxembourg CIA, or the Sri Lankan CIA? Right. Well, then let us get on with raping and mock executing people who may have done nothing wrong.
Do you support the release of this information?
No, I don't see that it does any good at all.
KT McFarland, thank you, leading our analysis there.
Fox News are amazing in that they will brazenly go on the television and defend the oppression of the people of America. This is one of the main things that we're interested in on The Truths, is the way that media supports existing structures, even when those structures are oppressing, attacking or undermining the people that the media is supposed to serve. Look at that word, media. It's meant to be the institution that's between the powerful and the governed, us. And if that filter is not trustworthy, if it lies to us, if it has the same agenda as governments, how can we trust it? This CIA report is important because around the world now, there are all sorts of measures that give governments more rights to spy on their own people. There are measures that give big companies more rights, like the TTIP will give international corporations the right to trade unimpeded and sue nation states that try and get in the way of them making a profit. If there are unaccountable government agencies that can torture without having to ever justify it or explain what they're doing, even when it doesn't work, we're living in a terrifying time. Isn't it obvious that if rape is a technique that is used to get information out of a person, that we're already in hell? There's no further to go. There's no further that we can decline. What this story shows is that, of course, the CIA are acting in an unaccountable, clandestine and terrifying way, and that the media are supporting them in that. And we've got no access, no purchase to power. When you hear a story like this, which exposes that massive media organisations like Fox News, owned by News International, that own The Sun, are untrustworthy, the CIA are terrifying, you think, what can we do? Well, what we can do are small things that symbolically represent that us, the people, can come together and oppose power. For example, Sheikh Amar is a UK resident, except he's been held in Guantanamo Bay. He was arrested in Afghanistan on the 24th of November 2001. He's been there since February the 14th, 2002. Happy Valentine's Day! Surprise! You're in Guantanamo Bay. Amar's mental and physical health has been declining over the years. He's participated in hunger strikes to protest against these illegal things that we now know are going on as a result of this report. There's some campaigns that we can support. For example, Save Sheikh Amar, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, savesheikh.org. Or learn more about the London Guantanamo Campaign blogspot. Learn more about that as well. And also support Reprieve. What can we do? In all of the cases where we have to confront mighty institutions, whether they're private or state, what we can do is come together and support localised campaigns. Although they may seem small, what it does is it represents that when we come together, we can change the world, because they're not going to do it for us. We've just seen how the media collaborates with the government in order to suppress the truth about the CIA. If you want true news, you have to get it for yourselves. True news, subscribe here, subscribe here, subscribe here.
Nose is a tool that is abused to fool you and to leave you scared and confused. Truths is like the news. If the news was true, I want some truths. Let's have some truths.
It was one of the truly sad moments of American history that the Bush administration chose to respond to the serious security threat posed by the September 11 terrorist attacks by resorting to torture. Now, it didn't call it that. It called it enhanced interrogation techniques. But behind that euphemism was blatant illegality. Things like waterboarding, mock execution by way of drowning, are blatantly illegal under both domestic and international law. Torture can never be used, even in time of war. But the Bush administration used it over and over again with incredible brutality. We now know that the Bush administration's rationale for its resort to torture, its claim that it was useful, that the torture protected us, we know that that was false. The significance of the Senate Intelligence Committee report today is that it shows that despite those claims, we didn't get actionable intelligence that couldn't have been obtained through lawful means. Now, the CIA also says that it's unfair to second-guess them because they relied on legal opinions issued by the most senior lawyers of the Bush Justice Department, saying that this wasn't torture, that these enhanced interrogation techniques were legal, they were okay. Every soldier in war knows that you should never follow an illegal order, and we should expect no less from the CIA. If you look at these legal opinions, the so-called torture memos, these are not honest interpretations of the law. These are twisted efforts to justify the unjustifiable. They did not merit any deference, and the CIA's own lawyers, the senior officials in the CIA, should have seen that, known better, and refused to go along with the Bush administration's plan of torture. Now, one sad fact is that those lawyers themselves have never been disciplined, let alone prosecuted, for becoming essentially accomplices in torture. That's part of a broader problem, because President Obama came into office, and as far as we know, he stopped the torture, and that was important. But he's absolutely refused to permit broad investigation of the torture, let alone prosecution of the torturers. Using the slogan, "We're going to look forward, not back," he decided to move on. He had more important things to do than to prosecute this blatant illegality. So unfortunately, we get this important report from the Senate Intelligence Committee. It's an important statement of the truth, but there's no prospect of prosecution. And that's a very dangerous state of affairs, because what that means is that some future president facing a future security threat is going to look at torture as a policy option. President Obama could have said, no, this is clear illegality. We're going to prosecute this illegality. We're going to make clear that it should never happen again. But by choosing to move on, to forget about the past, not to prosecute this serious crime, Obama is keeping torture as a misguided, wrongful policy option for some future American president. It's not too late to change that. Obama still has 2 more years. So I hope he heeds the lesson from the Senate Intelligence Committee report and recognizes that this was not just wrong, it was not just unhelpful, but it was illegal and should be prosecuted.
Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Perez coming to you from Baltimore. Also, welcome to the Michael Ratner Report. Michael Ratner is the president of the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York and chair of the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights in Berlin. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael.
Always good to be with you, Sharmini, and the Real News.
So, Michael, it is a grim torture report. Give us the highlights.
You know, it's certainly grim. I guess highlights is one word. I guess another word is lowlights, because it's really brutal reading. And I've been working on this with the Center for Constitutional Rights for years on the torture. We have clients who were tortured, some of them mentioned in this report. But to read this in black and white and to read how ferociously brutal it was, and the individual stories is just shocking. I mean, I recommend highly people read that report, read excerpts of it online. I mean, some of the most brutal, we've seen some of it before, the waterboarding of people up to in some cases 183 times. The CIA had claimed that only 3 people were waterboarded, but then they have photographs, apparently the Senate committee who did this report, and that's the Senate Intelligence Committee, found photographs in Afghanistan and other places of buckets of water around waterboards for obviously other people. CIA had a process called dousing, which is like waterboarding, very similar. They just don't call it that. And when you read the stories of people waterboarded, hung from the ceiling, and then in one case, while the person's being interrogated, when they knew the person didn't have any information on what they wanted, which was about plots in the United States, they kept going for a week, waterboarding and then putting the person into coffins. One was called a large coffin for something like 11 days on and off. Another one, the small coffin, 21 inches wide, 2.5 feet high, and you're locked into that coffin. I mean, this is hard to believe, this report. Another technique, which despite my knowledge and others of the torture regime, was called rectal rehydration or rectal feeding. A word that we could use for that is anal rape. And in one case, Majid Khan was a client of the center. What they did is they would serve his meal tray, which had hummus on it, in this case pasta, and then they would puree it. And then according to the report, they would puree it and force it up his anus. Basically not for medical reasons, but as a form of torture of Majid Khan. I mean, it is shocking. And the questions that I have are many. First of all, let's understand what we have here. We have a report of the executive summary of 500 and some pages from the Senate Intelligence Committee. It's heavily redacted. There was a big struggle to even get this out. The CIA, and sad to say, the Obama administration, insisted on more redactions than the Senate committee wanted. For a while, the Senate committee and Senator Feinstein, who is close to the intelligence agencies, said, we're not putting it out unless you let us put in a more thorough report. Things that are redacted are like crazy. The names of the 9 countries where they had secret black sites where this torture of over 100 people went on. They give them the code names in the report. Something called Cobalt is, for example, one. Well, anybody in this field, like me and others, we know what these places are. They've been revealed. Cobalt is what we refer to as the salt pit in Afghanistan. Heavy torture went on in the salt pit. They take out the names of 2 of the people, Jessen and Mitchell, who were the private contractors doing the interrogations. Their company received something like $80 million. They did 85% of the interrogations. The report just is scathing about their lack of knowledge about what they were doing, the money that went to them. The report doesn't put their names and gives them a pseudonym. Their names have been out there forever. So you got those kind of stupid redactions. But it doesn't take away from the incredible, incredible impact of this report. A brutality far worse than any of us knew. Now let's put it into this context. This is only a report on the CIA interrogation program at the so-called black sites, the 9 sites we know about, from Thailand to Poland to Romania, that we know about. But just remember, this doesn't include Guantanamo. It doesn't include Abu Ghraib. It doesn't include other prisons run by the military around the world.
Now, Michael, does it include the contractors that had been hired to do some of this torturing?
It doesn't include renditions either. And then as far as contractors, that's what I was saying about Jessen and Mitchell, who were 2 psychologists who ran the program here, private contractors. 85% of the interrogations at these 9 black sites, these torture sites, were done by private contractors. A contract of $80 million went to them for these these private interrogations. And so you ask yourself, yes, it's driven by torture, it's driven by our government, but is it also being driven by the fact that so much of this money of our military is going to private contractors who are making billions ultimately? So yes, it's private contractors did a lot of this. As I said, the report is explosive on the types of things that were done to people and their stories, including one story of a person who was tried here in New York eventually, al-Nashri, hung from a ceiling for 2.5 days. 2.5 days hung in a position with a diaper on, not allowed to go to the bathroom, etc. A death from hypothermia, a man chained to the floor, etc. So we get all of that. Now, one of the big arguments that's being had is, was it effective or was it not effective? Did we get intelligence like that we saw in Zero Dark 30 to track down Osama bin Laden, as all the propaganda says, as the CIA says, as Cheney says, as Bush says, all of these, what you'd only have to call politician, pundit, torturers are saying. In fact, according to this report, no intelligence was gotten by the torture. None that would led to any of these the 20 plots from being stopped, none that really led to Osama bin Laden being found. So the answer is it wasn't effective. But of course, that's not even the question we should be asking. The question that should be asked here is, why did they do something that was flatly illegal, for which there's no exceptions? You're simply not allowed to torture. That's the first question. But in addition, as I said, this report finds that it was not effective. And what it makes you wonder is, if it wasn't effective and the CIA had to know that, why were they doing it? According to the report, there were studies before 9/11 that said this kind of interrogation under torture doesn't work. You get false stories. People say anything to stop the torture, etc. So they knew it didn't work before. They clearly knew it didn't work during it, and they kept on going. And I remember reading a book called, it was Torture from Algeria to Abu Ghraib, or something like that, about Algeria, written by an Algerian. And her thesis was the torture that went on in Algeria was not for information. It was because of a declining empire, in which it was sort of the macho declining empire just decided, and in our case, the current one, Muslims on the other side, an empire that's been attacked at the heart of its financial area in New York City. And in fact, you could have to say that this torture really is about brutalizing and sending a message to the world. You fall into the hands of the United States, you will be tortured. So that was a conclusion. That's my conclusion, but the conclusion of the report is that nothing actionable, no justification for what went on.
Michael, the gruesome details of the report is, today all over the internet. And I guess what's in minds of everyone is, well, what are going to be the consequences for these people who conducted these interrogations in such unlawfulness?
Sharmini, that was exactly the last point I was going to get to, which is, I'm glad you asked it. It's about prosecutions. What's going to happen? There's clear crimes were committed, 100%. This is not 99%. This is 100%. We know who did it. We don't know everything, but we know a lot. And the U.S. has an obligation to prosecute torturers on its land. It's the Convention Against Torture. They're required to investigate and prosecute. And if they don't do it, any other country where these people travel to has to do it. And the key thing that happened on prosecutions was when Obama took office, he blinked, and blinked badly. Remember his statement? He said, we have to look forward and not backward. Forward, where we won't torture, but not backwards, where we did, or where he almost said we did. He said, in my mind, we tortured. But in any case, he said, look forward, don't look backward. He said, we're not going to have prosecutions. And in fact, of course, it makes no sense, because if you want to stop torture going forward in the future, you have to teach people a lesson that if you do it, you will be punished. It's not enough to write an executive order saying, let's not torture, because the next president, or even this one, can simply revoke it. And of course, I want to make as an aside here, there is still, we believe, some torture going on, forced feeding at Guantanamo, still sleep deprivation being allowed, isolation, sensory deprivation. But let's just talk about prosecution. So Obama blinked, and he blinked not because they couldn't get convictions in the end, because they were worried about an American jury, That's what some pundits are putting out now. He blinked because essentially this country and this part of our establishment is run by the security establishment, the military and the intelligence. The person who's a CIA director was involved in this back when he was in the Bush administration. That's John Brennan. They wouldn't let him become CIA director the first 4 years of Obama. Apparently, they did enough washing of him that he is now the CIA director. So Obama is like this with the people who were deeply, deeply involved in what I consider one of the worst excesses of this government and the total denial of obligation that they had to take regarding torture. Now, let's talk about what Obama said recently. He's made some press statements, as have his press people. First of all, he gave a whole thing yesterday about how these people in the CIA are patriots. They put their lives on the line. He talked about the CIA stars in front of the building for the dead CIA agents who died in the so-called cause of America, or I would say the cause of imperialism all over the world. And so he talks about that. And then he says, in my mind, this was torture. He doesn't say this was torture. It has to be gone after. We have to really prosecute the people, as is our obligations. Then they asked today at the press conference of his press person, they asked, well, what do you think about this question of does torture, did it work or did it not work? And the press person made an incredible answer. He says, we're going to remain agnostic on that. It's being debated now. But let me just say, that debate shouldn't be happening. There should not have been torture. The question of does it work or not work is irrelevant, although this report clearly says it doesn't work. So what do we have now? We have, first of all, a number of liberals, people I've worked with, not saying there shouldn't be prosecutions. It's impossible. We'll never get it. Therefore, let's just go on with this. You know, that's an outrageous position. It's required legally to get prosecutions. We have to all be calling for it. The Center for Constitutional Rights has on its website a petition and call for it, phone numbers, calling for prosecution of the torturers. It has to be done. The United Nations rapporteur, Ben Emerson, the UN said absolutely there has to be investigations and prosecutions of the torturers. I think it's a very hard struggle, but when I think about it, I think about Argentina, I think about Chile, I think about the countries that went through their bad, dirty wars of torture. And eventually, today as we speak, 200 trials going on in Argentina for torture and killings that took place over 20 years ago. So I'm not without hope on it. The United States is difficult, but of course now there's even a bigger call for international prosecutions. I don't mean by that the International Criminal Court, which the U.S. is not a member of. I mean national courts in various states. My office, the center, has brought a prosecution that's still pending in Spain for Guantanamo tortures. We lost the ones in Germany and Switzerland. If there's a time to renew it, it's now. And so I feel really strongly this report has actually sent an incredible message, and perhaps we will be turning a page on getting prosecutions. Now, is prosecutions the only answer? No, to stopping torture. But is it a necessity? Yes. Because other than that, and this is my last comment, torture becomes a political football, which if you look at the pundits and the stations and the radio and TV and the newspapers now, that's what it is. Cheney and everybody saying, oh, it works, we had to use it. Other people are saying it didn't work, the Senate committee, and it becomes a political controversy. It's not that. Torture is illegal under all circumstances by anyone, anywhere in the world.
Michael, one final question to you. Is the Obama administration, if the torture Convention on the Torture requires them to prosecute those who have tortured, are they not on the hook to actually bring about some cases against those who are here legally?
Well, yes, they are. Legally, the Convention Against Torture requires the Obama administration.
One guy who might be living up to his values, as questionable as they may be, is George W. Bush, and he had a comment on the report release yesterday before the report came out.
We're fortunate to have men and women who work hard at the CIA serving on our behalf. These are patriots. And whatever the report says, if it diminishes their contributions to our country, it is way off base. And I knew the directors, I knew the deputy directors, You know, I knew a lot of the operators. These are good people, really good people, and we're lucky as a nation to have them.
So here's some of the good stuff those people did. They forcibly held his head underwater while he struggled to breathe, and they beat him repeatedly, hitting him with a truncheon-like object and smashing his head against the wall. And then they threatened to rape his mother. These are good people.
Yeah.
These are really good. These are good Christian people.
Good people.
I wish someone would smash a pie in his face.
George Bush still thinks that somehow saying that he knows people adds something to the dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always like I talked to my CIA man. That's not a thing.
Yeah.
That's not a, that doesn't, and what did the conversation, what happened in the conversation? What was the result of the conversation? What did you decide to do? I had him up here. Also, had him up here. We had some water, we had some coffee.
Yeah.
Went over the ball scores.
Good people.
Did George W. Bush never see Independence Day? Because you remember in Independence Day when they find the aliens, and then the president says, "Why didn't I know about this?" Bill Pullman? He says, "Why didn't I know about this?" And the guy goes, 2 words, plausible deniability. So part of me does think maybe Rumsfeld wasn't handing Bush notes going, "Look at what we're doing," because you have to be able to deny what we're doing, right? So Bush almost seems like a willful idiot to me more than anything else.
Here's the difference. The standard is you knew or should have known. We've prosecuted people under that same. So George Bush should have known. Dick Cheney should have known. They knew.
Well, Dick Cheney knew.
Well, we know Dick Cheney.
So that's the standard. That's the threshold. And of course, we're not going to. So every person, you know, so I say every time I pay my taxes, I feel like a sucker. Every time I follow the rules, I feel like a sucker. Because nobody in power follows the rules in America. This is a banana republic. It's a plutocracy. And if you follow the rules, you're a sucker.
Yeah. All right. Well, George W. Bush actually was briefed on the torture report back in 2006. And we've got this quote from the Senate Intelligence Committee report. According to CIA records, when briefed in April 2006, the president expressed discomfort with the image of a detainee chained to the ceiling, clothed in a diaper, and forced to go to the bathroom on himself. The CIA's June 2013 response does not dispute CIA records, but states that while the agency records on the subject are admittedly incomplete, former President Bush has stated in his autobiography that he discussed the program, including the use of enhanced techniques, with then DCIA tenant in 2002 prior to the application of the techniques on Abu Zubaydah, and personally approved the techniques. So that sort of goes against what I was trying to give him some level of incompetence, because I think he was
he's an incredibly incompetent guy. I mean,
yeah.
He just is. And every time you hear him talk, it's a stark reminder that we elected that guy to be president twice. Well, we didn't really elect him the first time, and the second time, the nonsense war that he got us in is what got him reelected. So I'm not interested in whether he knew. We're never going to know exactly what he knew, but I think he knew. And
I mean, that's pretty much saying he knew.
As we know, he wasn't a detail-oriented guy, but Dick Cheney was, and that's where it all came down. It all came down through the vice president's office. We know all this. This is all documented.
Yes.
These are all certain things.
And then they got you to write the legal finding that said it was okay to torture people.
And then
so that's all George Bush had to see. Oh, I got a lawyer who says it's okay.
Right. They came up with, in many ways, what strikes you as the easiest out ever, which is get a lawyer to say it's legal.
Yeah.
And write it down and stamp it.
Yeah.
And send it around to people, and then it's legal.
Yeah.
George Bush said in 2006, I want to be absolutely clear, our people and to the world, the United States does not torture. It's against our laws and it's against our values. I have not authorized it and I will not authorize it. Well, we find out we were torturing. So not only was he torturing, he was publicly lying about what we were doing.
Wait, what was the date on that?
2006.
2006. I mean, that's when this quote is from, too. So we don't know if it's from before or after, but right around the same time.
Yeah.
But Dave, he knew.
Yeah.
They tortured people. And then the CIA lied about the information it was getting because that was the only way to sustain the process, the only way to convince the American people that that was acceptable.
Welcome to the Daily Show. My name is Jon Stewart. We got a good one tonight. My guest, Suki Kim. She is the author of With You, There Is No Us. It's a book about her time teaching in North Korea. What? Yes! First, I tell you, it's an exciting night. You know, it's snowing out here, and you got a whole thing. I'm so excited. Hold on. Let me just get All the pens, okay. All right. Yeah, it's a whole wonderland down there of 29-cent pens. All right. The exciting thing tonight is we got our choice of stories that we're looking at for you. You got your royal couple on a magical whirlwind frolic through New York City. Pip, pip, cheerio. Or the aftermath of the Senate Intelligence Committee's torture report. What choice do we make on this holiday season hump day? You know what? Why don't I just flip a coin? Flip a coin. Heads, we do the super fun royal visit. Tails, a swan dive into the grim morass of Satan's anus. Here we go. Heads fun, tails, mother. All right. You know what? You know what? Actually, let me just pick a card at random. I'm going to pick a card at random. I'm going to go there. I'm going to pick a card at random. If it's the Ace of Hearts, we'll do the torture story. 1 in 52, and we'll mother. Okay, all right. Okay, you know what? Okay, let's make it a game of skill. Can a brother get a jar of jelly beans out here, please? Can I get a jar?
Right up, step right up.
Okay.
How many jelly beans are in the jar?
All right, here we go. If I guess the exact number of jelly beans in the jar that my friend Jordan is holding up, we do the torture report. So here's what I'm going to say. 5 jelly beans.
Seriously?
Yeah, 5.
Are you me, Stuart?
No.
Seriously?
5.
5 jelly beans is correct!
Oh, my God.
You win yourself a torture report. Don't read it all at once. It'll make you puke.
All right. Thank you very much, Jordan. I appreciate it. All right. Well, by now, we've all had an opportunity to digest in all its putrid glory the shocking acts carried out by our government after 9/11 in the name of keeping us safe. From forced rectal hydration to a half-naked prisoner dying of hypothermia chained to a floor. On the other hand, isn't 24 hours long enough for us to feel bad about ourselves as a country? I mean, there's got to be myriad ways we can minimize this. To the pushback mobile.
George Tenet was the head of the CIA. He maintains that it wasn't torture.
Dick Cheney is slamming the release of this report and the references to, he says, so-called torture.
General, do you think that what took place was torture?
No, legally not. Look, I understand the release of this report puts these gentlemen in a stressful and painful position, and that they would probably say anything to make it stop, but not torture. I mean, sleep deprivation, forced stress positions, waterboarding, beatings. I'm sorry. I'm reading that from what the Germans did to U.S. soldiers and our allies in World War II, which we subsequently treated as war crimes and prosecuted in the Nuremberg trials. My confusion. But if it's not torture, it's not torture. Case closed. Moving on. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge bid a fond farewell to the Big Apple today.
John, beans don't lie.
Why must you haunt me, Jelly Bean Carney? All right, fine. Why else shouldn't we be releasing this report?
This is reopening an old wound.
We've been through this before.
This is actually all old news.
To come back now, this many years later, it's not going to. This many years later, it's not going to do anybody any good.
Yes, so many years later. It all happened in the year 2002. I remember cars ran on gasoline. And Spider-Man was played by one Tobias Maguire. Not this newfangled Andrew Garfield. So apparently, what we did wasn't torture. And even if it was torture, who can remember all the way back? But of course, while it's best not to remember things from that time that implicate us, Surely we must never forget the things that will exonerate us.
It is critical to remember, after the September 11 attacks, the fear of a follow-on attack was pervasive, and it was genuine. The nation was traumatized.
But we were scared. Surely a temporary state of agitation can be used as a defense of any crime. For instance, my client, Mr. Jeffrey Dahmer, yes, he killed and ate his neighbors. But at the time, he was hungry. Now, as you can see, he is pleasingly full, and his depravity has ceased. So, we didn't torture, we think. It was so long ago that we don't even really remember, but we do remember being scared. Here's how twisted up you have to be to try not to address the reality of our actions. This is former Bush administration communication director Nicole Wallace explaining why no matter what we do, people are going to want to kill us in America. And why we shouldn't be having this conversation about torture because it's going to make people want to kill us. All during the same program.
I think words matter. I think you made that pretty clear this morning. And Senator Kerry is, I think, correctly concerned that debates like the one we're having right now may endanger American lives.
The notion that what we do affects the behavior of terrorists is a lie. It's a lie perpetrated by political correctness and by liberals, and it's dangerous.
If having this debate puts us in danger, but what we do, see, that's the problem with this torture report. Words speak louder than actions. Now we get to the real argument, that no matter who we say we are as a country, don't the ends justify the means?
People at the CIA who worked with this program know it worked.
An awful lot of actionable intelligence collected under the CIA program.
Sometimes you do get the information you need. The program had proven its worth.
Has produced results, does produce results.
People will talk when they're under duress.
Yes, generally something along the lines of, ow. Stop. Ow. I'll tell you anything, ow. I don't have the words anymore.
Mr. McGovern, thank you for being with us. You served, I believe, in the CIA for 27 years. How do you feel about what has been revealed in this report?
Yes, 27 years, and before that as an officer in Army intelligence, so I feel very close to these interrogation matters. The report is not a surprise. It is a reassurance that the Senate can actually investigate these matters. It is a disgrace, of course, what they have uncovered. Hopefully it will, as Senator Feinstein says, be an assurance that this will not happen again. I find it appalling. I found the comment that I just heard saying that torture is always wrong. When I learned moral theology and ethics, torture was in the same moral category as slavery or rape, always wrong. And if that's not enough, now we know that it's not effective either.
Are you saying that what went on was very different from prior to 9/11 in terms of CIA operations?
Well, you know, the adage is after 9/11, everything changed. And that is quite true here. George Bush found a willing accomplice in George Tenet, head of the CIA, and the rest of the story is laid out for the world to see today.
Because there have been comments from other veterans saying, well, this was in the interest of national security and we did such things under the Clinton and other administrations.
The assumption there is that torture is effective. The head of Army intelligence, on the very day that George Bush bragged about the success of these enhanced interrogation techniques, the date was September 6, 2006, Lieutenant General John Kimmons, before the Pentagon, said, "No reliable information has ever come from harsh interrogation techniques. History has shown that, and the empirical evidence of the last 5 years, hard years, also shows that," period, end quote. 2006 minus 5 is 2001. The first person the United States government tortured was an American citizen named John Walker Lind, who was captured in Afghanistan. It's really, you know, for an intelligence professional to see that our moral bearings were completely lost at this nervous breakdown that we had on 9/12. It's very sad.
Is there a risk, though, that this report, as some Republicans are saying, will undermine the CIA and indeed America's ability to operate in its own security interests abroad?
Well, we Americans say garbage. I understand you British say rubbish. It's complete rubbish. It's as though Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State didn't know before that this had gone on. We know, for example, that when the jihadists came into Iraq in the mid 2008, 2009, those folks primarily were motivated by the photos that they saw at Abu Ghraib and what they had learned about enhanced interrogation techniques. So, if you want to keep a war going, if you want to have a very long line of recruiting for jihadists, torture is the unmistakably best way to do that.
White House, and John, this was vintage Cheney, as blunt as can be.
Oh, indeed, George. This was classic Cheney. When he was vice president, he personally signed off on this interrogation program, and he firmly believes it was both justified and it saved lives by preventing attacks. In an interview last night with Bret Baier on Fox News, he said that the CIA personnel that carried it out should be thanked, not blamed.
We did exactly what needed to be done in order to catch those who were guilty on 9/11 and to prevent a further attack. And we were successful on both parts.
This report says it was not successful.
The report's full of crap, excuse me. The work that was done was, I think, absolutely essential and absolutely crucial. I think we were perfectly justified in doing it, and I'd do it again in a minute. The CIA did one hell of a job, and they deserve our gratitude.
It's not surprising to hear Dick Cheney talk like that about that interrogation program. But what's interesting, George, is although he is much more blunt, his views on this are not all that different from President Obama's own CIA director, who says that
clear factual disparities between the Brennan response and the Panetta review. Committee staff grew concerned that the CIA was knowingly providing inaccurate information to the committee in the present day, which is a serious offense and a deeply troubling matter for the committee, the Congress, the White House, and our country. The Panetta review was evidence of that potential offense. So in order to preserve that evidence, committee staff securely transported a printed portion of the Panetta review from the CIA leased facility to the committee's secure offices in the Senate. This was the proper and right thing to do, not only because of the seriousness of the potential crime, but also in light of the fact that the CIA had previously destroyed interrogation videotapes without authorization and over objections of officials in the Bush White House. In my view, the Panetta review is a smoking gun. It raises fundamental questions about why a review of the CIA conducted internally years ago and never provided to the committee is so different from the official Brennan response and so different from the public statements of former CIA officials. That's why I asked for a complete copy of the Panetta review at a December 2013 intelligence. Although the committee now has a portion of the review already in its possession, I believe then, as I do now, that it is important to make public its existence and to obtain a full copy of the report. And that's why I'm here today, to disclose some of its key findings and conclusions on the Senate floor for the public record, which fly directly in the face of claims made by senior CIA officials past and present. For example, as I mentioned earlier, on a number of key matters, the Panetta review directly refutes information in the Brennan response. And in the few instances in which the Brennan response acknowledges imprecision or mischaracterization relative to the detention and interrogation program, the Panetta review is refreshingly free of excuses, qualifications, or caveats. The Panetta review found that the CIA repeatedly provided inaccurate information to the Congress, the President, and the public on the efficacy of its coercive techniques. The Brennan response, in contrast, continues to insist the CIA's interrogations produced unique intelligence that saved lives. Yet the Panetta Review identifies dozens of documents that include inaccurate information used to justify the use of torture and indicates that the inaccuracies it identifies do not represent an exhaustive list. The Panetta Review further describes how detainees provided intelligence prior to the use of torture against them. Prior to the use of the torture against them. It describes how the CIA, contrary to its own representations, often tortured detainees before trying any other approach. It describes how the CIA tortured detainees even when less coercive methods were yielding intelligence. The Panetta Review further identifies cases in which the CIA used coercive techniques when it had no basis for determining whether a detainee had critical intelligence at all. In other words, CIA personnel tortured detainees to confirm they didn't have intelligence, not because they thought they did. Again, while a small portion of this review is preserved in our committee spaces, I've requested the full document, a request that's been denied by Director Brennan. And I will tell you, the Panetta Review is much more than a summary and incomplete drafts, which is the way Mr. Brennan and former CIA officials have characterized it in order to minimize its significance. I've reviewed this document, and it is significant and relevant as it gets. The refusal to provide the full Panetta Review and the refusal to acknowledge facts detailed in both the committee study and the Panetta Review lead to one disturbing finding. Director Brennan and the CIA today are continuing to willfully provide inaccurate information and misrepresent the efficacy of torture. In other words, the CIA is lying. This is not a problem of the past, Madam President, but a problem that needs to be dealt with today. Let me turn to the search of Intelligence Committee's computers. Clearly, the present leadership of the CIA agrees with me that the Panetta Review is a smoking gun. That's the only explanation for the CIA's unauthorized search of the committee's dedicated computers in January. The CIA's illegal search was conducted out of concern that the committee staff was provided with the Panetta Review, and it demonstrates how far the CIA will go to keep its secrets safe. Instead of just asking the committee if it had access to the Panetta Review, the CIA searched without authorization or notification the committee computers that the agency had agreed were off limits. And in so doing, the agency may have violated multiple provisions of the Constitution, as well as federal criminal statutes and Executive Order 12333. More troubling, despite admitting behind closed doors to the committee that the CIA conducted the search, Director Brennan publicly referred to, quote, spurious allegations about CIA actions that are wholly unsupported by the facts. He even said that such allegations of computer hacking were beyond, quote, the scope of reason, end quote. The CIA then made a criminal referral to the Department of Justice against the committee staff who were working on the study. Chairman Feinstein believed these actions were an effort to intimidate the committee staff, the very staff charged with CIA oversight, and I strongly agree with her point of view. The CIA's Inspector General subsequently opened an investigation into the CIA's unauthorized search and found, contrary to Director Brennan's public protestations, that a number of CIA employees did, in fact, improperly access the committee's dedicated computers. The investigation found no basis for the criminal referral on the committee staff. The IG also found that the CIA personnel involved demonstrated a, quote, lack of candor about their activities to the Inspector General. However, only a one-page unclassified summary of the IG's report is publicly available. The longer classified version was only provided briefly to members when it was first released, and I had to push hard to get the CIA to provide a copy to the committee to keep in its own records. Even the copy in committee records is restricted to committee members and only 2 staff members, not including my staff member. After having reviewed the IG report myself again recently, I believe even more strongly that the full report should be declassified and publicly released, in part because Director Brennan still refuses to answer the committee's questions about the search.